My daughter announced, "You're not my real father. Mom's boyfriend is better." I said, "Okay." Then I sold her car and stopped her school payments. 2 days later, her mother was threatening legal action. I, 45M, thought I'd seen the worst of human nature during my divorce 3 years ago, but apparently I was wrong. What happened 2 weeks ago made me question everything I thought I knew about being a father, and honestly, I'm still processing whether I did the right thing or if I've become the monster everyone now claims I am. My daughter just turned 17 last month. I've been paying for her private school, bought her a car for her 16th birthday, and maintained her health insurance even though her mother got primary custody. The divorce settlement required me to cover these expenses until she turned 18, plus college tuition if she maintained decent grades. I never missed a payment, never complained about the costs, because despite everything that happened between her mother and me, she was still my daughter. That changed on a Tuesday evening when she came for her scheduled visit to my apartment. She'd been increasingly distant over the past few months, spending most of her time on her phone or making excuses to cut visits short. I figured it was typical teenage behavior, maybe some lingering resentment about the divorce. I was wrong about that too. She walked into my living room like she owned the place, which I guess in her mind she did. I asked her about school, her friends, the usual conversation starters that had been getting one-word responses lately. She barely looked up from her phone as she gave me the standard teenage grunt responses. Then I made the mistake of asking about her grades. She finally looked at me with this expression I'd never seen before. Pure contempt. She told me that she didn't need to explain anything to me because I wasn't her real father anymore. She said her mother's boyfriend was more of a father to her than I'd ever been, that he actually cared about her future and understood her in ways I never could. I felt something cold settle in my chest, but I kept my voice calm and asked her what she meant by that. She continued, telling me that her real father figure was the one who lived with them now, who helped with her homework, who took her shopping, who actually listened to her problems instead of just throwing money at them like I did. She said she was tired of pretending that our visits meant anything to her, and that the only reason she still came was because the court said she had to. The words hit me like physical blows, but what came next was worse. She told me that her mother and the boyfriend were planning to get married soon, and that she hoped he would adopt her so she could finally have a real family. She said she was embarrassed to tell her friends that I was her father because I was just some sad divorced guy living in a crappy apartment, while her mother had built a real life with someone who actually mattered. I sat there for what felt like hours, but was probably only a few seconds, processing what she'd just said. This was the child I'd raised since she was born, whose mother had cheated on me with her current boyfriend, destroying our marriage and our family. I'd never said a bad word about her mother in front of her, never tried to poison her against the man who'd helped destroy our family. I'd focused on being the best father I could be under the circumstances. I looked at her sitting on my couch, still scrolling through her phone like she'd just commented on the weather instead of destroying something fundamental between us. I asked her if that was really how she felt, if she truly believed that I wasn't her real father and never had been. She looked at me again with that same contempt and told me that biology didn't make someone a real parent. She said her mother's boyfriend proved that family was about choice, and she was choosing him as her father figure. She told me she wished her mother had never married me in the first place because then she wouldn't have to deal with this awkward situation of having a father who didn't really matter to her. That's when something inside me broke, not with sadness, but with a kind of clarity I hadn't experienced before. I told her that I understood perfectly, and that if she felt that way, she should be prepared to live with the consequences of that choice. She asked what I meant, and I told her she'd find out soon enough. She rolled her eyes and told me I was being dramatic, then said she wanted to go back to her mother's house early because she had plans with friends. I drove her back in complete silence, and she didn't even say goodbye when she got out of the car. That night, I sat in my apartment making a list of every expense I covered for her. The private school tuition was $1,500 a month. The car payment was $450, plus insurance, gas money, and maintenance. Her health insurance through my plan cost me $300 a month. Her phone bill, which I'd been paying since the divorce, was another $120. Various other expenses throughout the year for clothes, activities, and what she called emergencies probably added up to several thousand more. I realized I was spending close to $30,000 a year on a child who had just told me I wasn't her real father and never had been. a child who was embarrassed by my existence and wished her mother had never married me. The next morning, I called the private school and informed them that I would no longer be covering tuition payments. I explained that there had been a change in family circumstances and that they should contact her mother about future payments. I called my insurance company and removed her from my health plan. I contacted the financing company for her car and explained that I needed to surrender the vehicle since I would no longer be making payments. Then I called my lawyer and asked about modifying the divorce agreement based on changed circumstances. He told me that if she was rejecting me as her father and choosing to be adopted by another man, there might be grounds to petition for modified support requirements. He said it would depend on how serious she was about this adoption talk and whether her mother actually followed through with it. I didn't hear anything for 2 days, which was actually longer than I'd expected. On Thursday evening, my phone started ringing with calls from her mother. I let the first few go to voicemail, then finally answered when she called for the 6th time. Her mother was absolutely furious, demanding to know what I thought I was doing. She said the school had called asking about tuition, the insurance company had informed her that her daughter was no longer covered, and the car financing company had scheduled a repossession. She wanted to know if I'd lost my mind. I told her calmly that our daughter had made it very clear that I wasn't her real father, that her boyfriend was her chosen father figure, and that she was embarrassed by my existence. I said I was simply respecting her wishes and stepping back from the role she no longer wanted me to fill. Her mother tried to backtrack, saying that teenagers say stupid things when they're emotional and that I was being ridiculous. She said I was punishing a child for speaking without thinking and that this would hurt her future educational opportunities. I told her that her daughter had seemed very clear and confident about her feelings, not emotional or confused at all. Her mother then switched tactics and started threatening legal action, saying I was violating the divorce agreement and that she'd take me back to court for contempt. I reminded her that the agreement specified support until she turned 18 or was adopted by another parent, whichever came first. I said if she wanted to pursue adoption with her boyfriend, I wouldn't contest it, and that would resolve the support obligation entirely. That's when I heard her tone change completely. She started begging me to reconsider, saying that their relationship was complicated and adoption wasn't something they'd seriously discussed. She said her daughter was just going through a phase and testing boundaries, and that she'd talk to her about apologizing. I told her that an apology wouldn't change anything at this point. I said that her daughter had made her feelings crystal clear and that I was tired of being treated like an ATM by someone who found my very existence embarrassing. If she wanted a different father figure, then that person could take on the financial responsibilities that came with the role. The call ended with her screaming that I was a vindictive bastard who was destroying my own daughter's future out of spite. She said she'd see me in court and make sure everyone knew what kind of man I really was. Over the weekend, I got a series of increasingly desperate text messages from my daughter. She started with anger, demanding to know why I was ruining her life over something she'd said when she was upset. I responded by asking if she was claiming she hadn't meant what she said, and if she was ready to acknowledge that I was indeed her real father. She texted back saying that I was being petty and that a real parent wouldn't punish their child this way. I pointed out that according to her, I wasn't her real parent, so her criticism didn't make sense. I said her real father figure could handle these responsibilities from now on. Then the messages became more desperate. She said she was sorry for what she'd said, but that she couldn't afford to pay for school herself, and she needed her car to get to her job. I told her that her apology sounded more like regret about consequences than actual remorse for her words, and that she should discuss these problems with the man she'd chosen as her father figure. By Sunday evening, she was calling me crying, saying she'd made a mistake and asking me to fix everything. She said her mother's boyfriend had made it clear that he wasn't interested in taking on financial responsibility for her, and that her mother couldn't afford the private school tuition on her own. She would have to transfer to public school, find a way to get to her job without a car, and figure out health insurance. I told her that these were the natural consequences of her choices, and that I hoped her real father figure would help her work through these challenges. She started sobbing and said she was sorry, that she didn't mean it, and that she knew I was her real father. I asked her if she was only saying that because she needed money from me now, or if she genuinely understood that her words had been hurtful and wrong. She insisted she really meant it, but I could hear the desperation in her voice. This wasn't remorse. It was panic about her comfortable lifestyle being threatened. I told her that when she was ready to have a real conversation about respect, family, and the difference between a father and an ATM, she could call me. Until then, she should work things out with the parent she'd chosen. Update 1. It's been a week since my last conversation with my daughter, and the situation has escalated in ways I didn't expect. Her mother has indeed filed papers with the court, claiming I'm in violation of the divorce agreement and seeking immediate restoration of support payments. My lawyer reviewed everything and told me we have a strong position, especially if we can document the conversation where my daughter rejected me as her father. The problem is that my daughter is now claiming she never said those things, or that I'm exaggerating what she said. Her mother has coached her to present it as a typical teenage argument that got blown out of proportion. They're painting me as a vindictive father who's punishing his child for minor disrespect. I've been thinking about this constantly, wondering if I'm being too harsh. But then I remember the look on her face when she said those things, the casual contempt, the way she dismissed 17 years of my life and love like it meant nothing. That wasn't teenage anger. It was something deeper and more calculated. My brother thinks I'm being too extreme. He called me yesterday saying that teenagers are cruel and don't understand the impact of their words, and that I should be the bigger person and restore her support. He said that even if she was wrong, I'm the adult and should act like it. But my sister disagrees. She reminded me that when she was 17, she never would have dreamed of speaking to our father the way my daughter spoke to me. She said there's a difference between teenage rebellion and outright rejection, and that my daughter needed to learn that words have consequences. The car was repossessed on Tuesday, which apparently caused a scene at her school when she came out and couldn't find it. Her friends saw her calling her mother in tears, and now everyone knows about her family situation. I feel a little bad about the public embarrassment, but she was the one who said she was embarrassed by me in the first place. Her mother called again last night, this time trying a different approach. She said her daughter was learning her lesson and that I'd made my point. So couldn't we work out a compromise? She suggested that if I resumed payments, my daughter would commit to more regular visits and would work on her attitude. I told her that I wasn't interested in paying for my daughter's time or affection. I said that if my daughter genuinely wanted a relationship with me, it had to be because she valued me as her father, not because she needed my financial support. The court hearing is scheduled for next month. My lawyer thinks we'll prevail, especially since the divorce agreement does include language about support ending if she's adopted by another parent, and we can argue that she effectively chose another father figure. But he warned me that even if we win legally, this will probably end my relationship with my daughter permanently. I'm starting to wonder if that's what I actually want. Maybe she's right that we never had a real relationship if it could be destroyed this easily. Maybe I was just an ATM, and all those years of thinking I was being a good father were just self-deception. Update 2. The court hearing was last week, and it didn't go the way anyone expected. My lawyer had prepared our case around my daughter's rejection of me as her father, but when she took the stand, she completely changed her story. She testified that she'd been going through a difficult time adjusting to her mother's new relationship, and that she'd said some hurtful things to me out of confusion and pain, not because she actually meant them. She said she'd always valued our relationship and never intended to reject me as her father. She cried on the stand and said she missed me terribly and didn't understand why I was punishing her for a mistake. It was a compelling performance, and I could see it affecting the judge. But I knew it was exactly that, a performance. The girl who spoke those words to me with such clear conviction was not confused or emotional. She'd been making a calculated statement about her priorities and loyalties. Her mother testified that I was using financial manipulation to control my daughter and punish her for normal teenage behavior. She said that cutting off support was harming my daughter's educational opportunities and emotional well-being, and that it constituted a form of child abuse. When it was my turn to testify, I told the truth about what my daughter had said and the tone in which she'd said it. I explained that I wasn't trying to punish her for being disrespectful, but that I was responding to her clear statement that she no longer considered me her father and had chosen someone else for that role. The judge asked me if I really believed that a 17-year-old should face such severe consequences for words spoken in anger. I told him that if my daughter had been angry, I might agree with him, but that she hadn't been angry at all. She'd been calm, matter-of-fact, and seemingly proud of her position. But here's where things got complicated. My ex-wife's boyfriend was also present in court, and the judge asked him directly if he was prepared to adopt my daughter and take on financial responsibility for her. The man looked extremely uncomfortable and said that while he cared about my daughter, he and her mother weren't ready for that level of legal commitment. My daughter's face when she heard that was devastating to watch. You could see the realization hitting her that her chosen father figure wasn't willing to actually be her father in any legal sense. He was happy to be the fun guy who lived with her mother, but when it came to real responsibility, he was backing away fast. The judge made an interesting ruling. He said that while I was technically meeting the requirements of the divorce agreement, I was also clearly using financial support as a weapon in a family dispute. He ordered me to resume support payments, but reduce them by 30%, saying that my daughter's words and attitude showed a lack of appreciation that should be reflected in the support amount. He also ordered family counseling for both of us, saying that this situation had revealed serious problems in our relationship that needed professional intervention. The counseling sessions would be mandatory for 6 months, and if my daughter failed to participate meaningfully, the support could be modified again. Neither side was happy with this decision, but it felt like the right balance to me. I would continue supporting her because she is legally my child, but not at the same level as before, and she would have to participate in trying to repair our relationship. The first counseling session was yesterday, and it was brutal. The therapist asked my daughter to explain, in her own words, what she'd said to me that started this whole situation. She tried to minimize it again, saying she'd just been upset and said some things she didn't mean. The therapist then asked her to think about why her father might have believed she meant those words. My daughter looked confused, like she'd never considered that her delivery and demeanor might have affected how her message was received. Then the therapist asked me to describe not just what she'd said, but how she'd said it, and what I'd observed about her emotional state at the time. I explained that she'd seemed confident and clear, not upset or emotional, and that she'd appeared almost relieved to finally express these feelings. My daughter started crying at that point, and for the first time since this whole thing started, the tears seemed genuine. She said she hadn't realized how she'd come across, and that she had been feeling confused about family loyalties, but that she'd never meant to make me feel like I wasn't important to her. The therapist asked her why she thought her father's financial support had been important to her relationship, and whether she understood the difference between being supported because someone loves you versus being supported out of legal obligation. That's when my daughter finally seemed to grasp the real issue. She asked me if I thought she only cared about me because of money, and I told her honestly that I didn't know anymore. I said that her reaction to losing financial support had been much stronger than her reaction to potentially losing our relationship, and that made me question what I really meant to her. We have 5 more months of these sessions scheduled. I don't know if they'll actually fix anything between us, but at least we're finally talking about the real issues instead of pretending this was just about teenage disrespect. If you'd like to see more stories like this, a gentle tap on the subscribe and hype button would mean the world to us. Please subscribe and press the hype button. Thanks in advance.